Reverend Dr. Ryan Mehmandoost-Gauthier has over 20 years of experience in natural medicine and in the healing arts. He holds both a master's and a doctorate in acupuncture and oriental medicine. He additionally has a master's degree in healthcare leadership. Dr. Gauthier is a licensed acupuncturist and massage therapist, a registered yoga teacher, a clinical hypnotherapist, and a Reiki master teacher. He is ordained through the fellowships of the Spirit School of Spiritual Healing and Prophecy. Dr. Gauthier is the director of integrative medicine for a large health system in Metro Detroit. This program includes 7 clinics and 19 providers. Ryan teaches classes across the USA. He blends his years of experience and education in a down-to-earth approach to teaching. He loves to share his gifts with others. Do you wonder whether you should genuflect, salute, or curtsy when you see him? See, I got it in.
Well, let's hope we can follow that introduction. It's really nice to have Jane introducing because she's always been an encouragement. And she's an encouragement to everybody around here. And so it's just a real blessing to have Jane here. I also want to say thank you to Joanne for setting this up and keeping me on track as to what I needed to do. But the one thing I wanted to share was we were singing the song Home Again. And before we get into this, the passage here, as we heal, lessons will be learned. As we change ourselves, we change the world. We'll find the answer is love. We'll find together we are one. I don't know if I need to speak anymore. Really, that defines transformative grace. You know, just think about that for a second. Our changes have a ripple effect. And it's amazing how this service is set up, because here we are talking about our prayers and our joys and our gratitudes and what we want for other people, and dropping it into that water. And the water has that ripple effect, the cleansing emotion. That too is transformative grace. The act of lifting others up in prayer, others up in gratitude, that's where grace starts. So, to get into the actual speech, though, you know, I've been so blessed to be here this weekend. I got to work with a class yesterday teaching crystal healing, teaching my perspective on how to do that. I've got to spend time with many of you out into the community. It's been such a blessing. And I think that brings grace back into each and every one of us too. It's that chance to recharge, whether we're talking to people, whether we're teaching, whether we're just spending time with each other. It's those relationships and that connectedness that makes us all one. That's the grace. That's the grace we can bring back to our homes. That's the grace we can bring back to our lives. You know, it's such a beautiful thing. And I think that's really where I want to start. It's interesting because when Joanne emailed me that my topic was transformative grace, I read the email and I sat there quietly for a second. I was like, oh, that's a huge topic. I've talked on all sorts of things. I don't even know where to start. Because transformative grace, it's almost like it's up here. And how do you reach for that type of topic, right? So I phoned a friend and I said, here's transformative grace. What do you think? And the answer was, I'm not sure. Good luck with that one. So then I did some research. You know, I went onto the internet. I went to my personal library. I started pulling out books. I started reading. You know, growing up, I grew up in a very religious family, and grace is brought up. You sing about grace. They talk about grace all the time in our church services. But what does it really mean? And really, how does it transform? And as I was doing my research, I was like, there's got to be other people out there who hear this and you know what it is, but how do you really delineate that? And my thoughts were, first we want to explain grace in practical terms, right? We want to show how grace works in our everyday life, and we want to explore how grace can transform us and transform our community. What an undertaking, right? So, I felt, you know, you think about grace being external, but grace is really an internal process. It's really that piece of us that connects to the divine. The definition, it's funny because I tapped it into AI even. And I wanted to say, what does AI have to say about this? You know, this is the trend that's going on right now. We might as well look. You want to know what AI said? And it was very beautiful, actually. Transformative grace is a profound and often spiritual process by which individuals experience deep inner change and growth, typically leading to more compassionate, authentic, and purposeful living. I was like, wow, it did a good job, and we don't even need to edit the sentence. But we will give it credit. You know, it encompasses spiritual awakening, personal growth, compassion, empathy, and unconditional love. And you know, we think about grace and transformation and the change. Where does change start? Change starts with unconditional love. That love where we can look at somebody else and say that light, that human piece of us inside, connects with everybody else and the divine, those both here and on the other side of the veil. It's that love that we share that can change any situation. It's all about deep inner change. But we can take that a step further. Grace also encompasses divine acceptance and sanctification. In other words, it is grace that links the divine and universal energy to all of us. Grace is not something that we can earn, but it's something we can nourish spiritually. It should be freely given between people and between the divine. If you're like me, you sit here and you're like, that all makes sense, but what does that look like in a day-to-day life? Well, I'm about to share a personal story, a story I don't share very often. So let's start out here. I grew up in rural Michigan in a town of less than 1,500 people. There were 2 stoplights. One was a flasher. So if that tells you how small it was, there were probably more cows than people. My dad preached on Sunday. My mom played the piano. Sometimes she even preached on Sunday. We were in a very conservative church. I was well versed in the Bible. And it made this very interesting because grace is mentioned throughout the Bible. But grace moves beyond the Christian beliefs. It moves into everybody's beliefs, a shared connectiveness. My mom, you know, she showed grace in everyday life. She would always lend a helping hand. When people would come to our house, she would give food out of her own pantry and clothes out of her own closets before we went with, just to make sure other people could get through the day. It was an act of grace that you didn't see very often. But my mom also lived in chronic pain. Growing up, walking through a Target, she would be out for 3 days. When she was a child, she was playing up in the barn her parents had just built, and she fell and had major back problems. Growing up, she had 13 major back surgeries. At one point, she was even pronounced dead and had a near-death experience where a nurse was praying over her body after a surgery, and she could hear being called back and saying she had more work to do. And my mother was the most amazing person. You know, we could see her suffer from pain and see her not be able to go through a store, but yet every day give back to those around her, back to her family, back to her community, back to those in need. It's very interesting to talk about because I remember when I was 9 years old, there was a surgeon in Minnesota who was world-renowned. He was there from Africa. And he had perfected a brand new back surgery, and she was a candidate for it. We flew her out to Minnesota. I spent the summer with my grandparents, and for the first time in her life, after the surgery, she was pain-free. Okay? Recovery was long. It was a crazy process. I remember giving injections into a port during her recovery period at 9 years old. I remember that she was not able to move and function well, but when she was better, okay? I'd never been able to see her move so well, feel so much joy, and that just amplified what she gave back to the community. However, It was back in the 90s when minivans were popular. My mother went and wanted to get an Astrovan for me and my 2 sisters and my dad. It was the top line car, but we had to travel across state to get a deal with this car, okay? So we went all the way over to Detroit, which was 4 hours from where we grew up. And it was me driving over with my parents that day at 9 years old, okay? And they picked out this van. They were so excited about it. It had the little mini blinds, the metal ones, which now we would look upon and laugh at. A pinstripe down the side. And so we were driving back, and my mom wanted to show the van to her mother, my grandma. She had my dad pull over. It was the first time she had driven since her surgery. We were a mile from my grandma's house. As we drove there, she was so excited to pull into the drive. My grandma did not know that we had gone car shopping that day. As we pull up to the car, my mom goes to turn into the drive, and I saw a red truck come through a stop sign. It flew through the stop sign, hit our car. My mom's seat flew back onto me, trapping glass between myself and the seat. And next thing I knew, an ambulance was there taking my mom out of the car. What had happened was, sorry, I'm going to try and keep it together for this one, was a drunk driver who was intoxicated came through the stop sign, and after only a month of being pain-free, reversed my mom's surgery. That's a lot. But that did not stop her. Even though she could not have another surgery because it was too risky, she continued to give back to her community. All the doctors could offer was more pain medication. From that point, from 9 to 15, they piled on medications. But she still gave back to her community. Grace. Divine grace. It was her relationship to that higher power that allowed her to get through that pain and allowed her to give back. At 15 years old, my mom took a dose of her medication and collapsed of a heart attack. She was gone. I'm sharing this vulnerable story that I've been able to tell before in the past and not cry, but I'm sharing it today because grace is that situation that is passed on from people who share compassion and love to their community. It was that choice that I had to make after that if I was going to go down a path of destruction because I had lost my mom in my rock, or if I was going to turn and give back to my own community. I went on to study all the things that you heard in the introduction. I've treated thousands of patients in my lifetime. It's not about bragging. It's not about any recognition needed for that. It's about helping others on their path. That is divine transformation. That is the true gift. And if I can share anything with you, is the impact we have on those around you is so huge. Every day, you can choose to have grace in no matter what situation you're in. You can choose to give back. You can choose to love. You can choose to turn around from a situation. We all make mistakes. We all say wrong things. We all have times where we're jealous. But we can step away from that and also make the choice to pivot. And that's what divine grace is, to be able to pivot on any moment. There is beauty in sharing the connectedness with our families, with our friends, with our greater community, and with the divine. Divine grace is saying that we're not perfect, but we are perfect right where we're at. So I went a little off script as well. But to wrap this up, I've helped many people on their ups and downs in their path, and what I've learned is healing is not linear. Healing is in a spiral. We learn, we grow, we make choices. Healing happens in the mind, body, and spirit, sometimes all at the same. Sometimes it's only one aspect that the healing can happen in. But as we heal, we change, as that song said. And as we change, we can have an impact on those around you. You know, I was blessed not only to be rated one of the top acupuncturists in the state of Michigan multiple years in a row, but to be able to be appointed to the regulatory board and also run the department at one of the top hospitals there. And in that blessing, one of the things you learn is, even though I'm not able to give hands-on treatments anymore because my job has gotten so big, the impact I have by designing programs treats thousands of patients every week in our department. Thousands of patients with no other answers. But you know, sometimes that treatment is not about the physical disease. It's about nourishing that spirit. And that is as much grace as helping the person be pain-free. And so I share, you know, grace is available to all of us. It's there to awaken us. It's there to help us reflect. It's there for us to share unconditional love. And it ultimately transforms us. All we need to do is lean into that grace. We need to listen to the divine calling. We need to have faith and step in the right direction to start to change the world. My mom always used to say, faith the size of mustard seed moves mountains. Guess what? It's time to go move mountains. So I thank you so much, and I thank you for letting me be vulnerable in front of you today. And I hope that this is a good way to wrap up your section on divine grace. Blessings.